Hello and welcome to the NEXUS Mountain Network podcast. Today's special guest is Mark Whitacre. If you are new to the NEXUS Mountain Network, you should know that we are a social network for Christians to connect together, learn together, and achieve together God's purposes in society outside of the four walls of the church. If you would like to connect with thousands of Christians around the world and locally, you can download our free NEXUS Mountain Network app. It has capabilities like Facebook, LinkedIn, podcasting, courses, and things like this show. And so you can do that now for free. Today's guest, Mark Whitacre, is the highest ranking executive, corporate executive, to be an informant with the FBI. If you've seen the movie The Informant played by Matt Damon, that's Mark. I should say that's Mark. Oh, my back camera's messed up. Mark's on the camera, so it is Mark. He has a PhD from Cornell. He has a wild story about being in federal prison and all the steps he had to take to get there. He is the author of a book, Against All Odds, and he's currently, and I'm excited to talk about this as well, he is an executive director for Coca-Cola Consolidate. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chad. Good to be here.
That was a mouthful. You have so much. I had to consolidate that. Speaking of consolidated, I had to consolidate that. And, so my audience, I want you to know, I saw Mark speak at a Purpose Summit in Charlotte, and I was blown away. I was blown away by the just critical decisions he had to make along the way and the pros and cons for those decisions. And then also, we're going to talk about how this is crazy. So he has 18,000 employees in his company, and he is able to literally, tangibly, and practically minister the gospel within this company. And a lot of people say, you can't do that today. We're going to talk about, yes, we can. So Mark, before we get started, let's just start with, give us the high level of your story, and I'm going to probably dissect a couple things I want to highlight. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was 32 years old at the time when you talk about being the highest level whistleblower in U.S. history. And in reality, the whistleblower was my wife. My wife was a Christian 10 years before I was. As you mentioned, I got my PhD in biochemistry from Cornell. Went 8 years of college from high school, full scholarship. The only child out of four children in my family that went to college at all. And my mom was worried when she recognized me when I got out of college, especially in a secular university. Grew up in a Christian home, but all I heard for 8 years, never met one Christian professor. Had plenty of professors in the sciences say, if you believe in God, you cannot be a scientist. If you believe in God, you can't get a PhD in science. I had one physics professor, if you believe in God, I want you out of my class. And when you hear that for 8 years, not meeting one Christian professor, I told all my friends at Cornell that my parents are Christians because they didn't go to college and they simply do not know better.
Wow.
That's where I was,
wow.
In my early 20s when I was starting my PhD. So I became a Christian later in life. I became a Christian at 40. And so after I finished Cornell, the biotech industry was exploding. There were 10 jobs in 1983 for every graduate, especially from an Ivy League university. It's when Genentech had started. Wow. And I mean, it was six figures really quick, and bought our first home, our first year. And I was 25 years of age. And I started getting addicted to that lifestyle. By the time I was 32, think about this, Chad, I'm 7 years out of college, out of Cornell. I'm 32 years old at the time. I was divisional president of a company called ADM Archer Daniels Midland, a divisional president and corporate vice president of the whole company, a divisional president of the biotech division, the fastest growing division of the company, 70 billion in revenue, 32,000 employees, and the 56th largest company on the Fortune 500. We had a 75-year-old CEO, a 71-year-old COO and president, and I was 32, and I was ranked number 4 executive in the company. Wow. And they were double my age, the three above me.
Wow.
So I had plenty of room to move up. And I remember I bought the CEO's home my first month there in that role. I was there for about 8 years. It was a 13,000 square foot house with an eight car garage, 3 golf greens on the property. Our CEO was a billionaire. He owned 5% of ADM. He was 35 years in that home. And I had that home because he wanted to move to something smaller. And he gave me a startup bonus my first month where I could be the down payment to buy that home. And it had horse riding stables with an inside arena. At 32, not knowing God, and with earning 7 figures with bonuses, base salary bonuses and stock options, 7 figures for 8 years each year. And with earning that, and keep in mind, that's 1989.
Jeez.
I mean, a $3 million salary then would be like a $10 million salary today.
Right.
That's not base salary. That's total.
Yeah, sure.
Options. And I got addicted to that. I had my own jet. the first month there, the 7 top executives each got their own jet. I had a Falcon 50 for 8 years. I lived in a mansion, and I was Justin Bieber before Justin Bieber. Is probably the
Did you look like him?
I had blonde hair blowing in the wind.
Okay. All right.
But I was addicted. I was addicted to that lifestyle. And here's my wife, who became a Christian. I remember when my wife became a Christian at 30. Her mom was really sick. This was a few years before I was divisional president at ADM. I was that role at 32. I met my wife, by the way, when she was 7th grade and I was 8th grade. We met in junior high, went to all our high school proms together. So her mom was in a hospital for 10 months and she became a Christian. And I said, Ginger, I'm a PhD scientist from an Ivy League university. And you know how I talk about this often. God doesn't exist. She said, Mark, I'm telling you wrong. God exists. Jesus is the Son of God. And I'm going to pray for you until you know him.
Nice.
But she said, Jesus is the Son of God. And I'm telling you, it is the most wonderful thing she said happened to her. When she was sitting by her mom's side in a hospital, her mom was only 52 at the time, and her mom almost died. And Ginger was by her side for 10 months in that hospital each day until her mom got out, and barely got out. Her mom had almost died during that time. And so Ginger's a Christian. So she's driving a 10-year-old Grand Cherokee. I had Ferrari, 2 BMWs. I had that 8-car garage full of, I'm $3 million a year for 8 years. So, I mean, I had that garage full of exotic cars. And I remember telling Ginger, I said, Ginger, I bought with last month's bonus a red Ferrari. Let me buy you a yellow one this month. And she said, no, my Grand Cherokee, which was 10 years old, she said, I think I got another 5 years on it. I want to be a good steward for God. It was like Latin. I didn't even know what that meant for her to tell me that. And she just had so much peace and contentment where she was. And she said, Mark, I don't think you're being a good steward for God for all these things you're doing, this house, these cars, all these horses in the stable, inside riding arena that was heated. She said, I don't think you're being a good steward for God. And she said, I'm just going to keep praying for you. So then in early 30s.
Okay. So when I heard you tell this story, there was a critical moment that you finally came to her because you were under a great deal of stress. You were in this business. You knew things were being done wrong with regards to price fixing within the organization, which was causing lots and lots and lots of more money. And the pressure was getting to you, and your wife, if I remember correctly, she said to you, Mark, what's wrong?
Yeah, we did. This was 2 years at the company. And when I was 2 years with the company, there were only 3 leaders above me out of the 32,000 employees. My role as CEO, a COO, and a vice chairman. And one of those came back to my office and said, Mark, you're part of the family now. You've been with us 2 years. So I'm 34 years old now. We're going to start telling you how we do business. And I said, well, I'm here 2 years. Corporate vice president of the whole company. I know how we do business. They said, no, there's some things we haven't told you. And they started talking about a cartel where they were fixing prices with our competitors. Wow. And they said, Mark, at their ages, because now the CEO's 77, because I'm 2 years there, he's not 75 anymore. The president's 73. So they said, we got to start grooming some young leaders to take this over. And we're going to bring you got the right personality. And we love your work ethic, that you're the one we think that should take this over. So we're going to start mentoring you. And I said, well, that's not legal. And they said, Mark, I'm telling you, we've been doing it 12 years. Anyone in the commodity business, this is the way business is done. Everybody does it, Mark. This is the way business is done. You're just out of college, less than 10 years now, but this is the real world. And we're going to teach you how to do it. And eventually you're going to lead this. And so I'm doing that for about 7 months, being mentored. And I'm having a conversation with my wife because we always had the FBI in our company. Even since I joined, they were helping with the Chicago board. Basically, ADM has 32,000 employees in Decatur, Illinois, that has 80,000 people live in that town. Jeez. So it's a company town. Yeah. So the FBI, when they in Decatur, they were mainly helping ADM. So I was telling my wife in just this casual conversation in November 5th, 1992, a couple of years with the company now, I said, it's interesting how the FBI is helping ADM do these little cases, but there's this huge price fixing case, international cartel right out from under their nose. It was just a conversation. And she said, well, Mark, what do you mean by that? She said, tell me more about that. And I said, well, we get together our competitors. I'm only 7 months involved now. It's been going on for 12 years. But I said, Ginger, we're going to go from $3 million a year to eventually $10 million a year because they're grooming me to take this over. I'm going to be the next COO and president. They're grooming me to be the COO. And they even published that in Fortune magazine. So that wasn't something. As they got older, they had to start talking about their succession plan. And they included me in that succession planning. So I said, I'm going to go from number 4 to number 2. She said, you know what, Mark, I'd rather have 2 Fords in the driveway, 2,000 square foot house instead of 13,000 square feet. I'd rather have my husband back. She said, I've lost the man I fell in love with in high school. She said, you're addicted to all this materialism and this lifestyle and the title and working for a large company. She said, it's addiction. And then she started asking more about the price fixing. And I told her, and she said, well, how much the company earn? I said, well, they've earned hundreds of millions of dollars a year doing this. We're 70 billion in revenue, 4 billion in profit, and probably an extra, maybe close to $1 billion of that is from the price fixing, maybe 25%. She said, well, who pays that? I said, well, Kellogg's, Pillsbury, Kraft, when they pay for these ingredients they buy from ADM, basically they have a profit margin built in. So the consumers in the grocery store is paying for this extra $1 billion a year the company's making. And she said, you mean my grandma on Social Security earning $800 a month and her biggest expense is groceries, and she's paying for this, and we live in a mansion with an 8-car garage? She said, Mark, I can't believe you're doing this. This is a fraud. She said, is this legal? I said, well, it's not legal, but everybody does it. They tell me that, and I see it with all the competitors showing up in the meetings. Everybody does it. If you're in the commodity business, this is the way business is done. And she said, Mark, I tell you, it's an outright fraud. I don't know if I can live with this. Then she said she was going to pray about it. We talk about it later. When she told me she was going to pray about it, I knew I was in trouble.
Yep, that's right.
So she prayed for a little over an hour, came back, and she said, Mark, God led me to a decision. This is a massive fraud. This is stealing from every consumer. ADM's got plants all around the world, Latin America, Europe, Asia, United States. Every consumer is being ripped off by this scheme. And she said, I'm really troubled by it. And she said, I've made a decision, and God led me to this decision during my prayer. Either you're telling the FBI today or I'm telling them for you. But we're exposing this fraud that's been going on for 12 years.
Wow.
And so we argued. I said, Ginger, our CEO is best friends with President Clinton. He's on the phone on a regular basis with President Clinton. I said, he's a billionaire. He will destroy us. One of the most powerful men in the world at that time. And I said, and I could go to federal prison. This is breaking antitrust laws. I could go to prison for this. She said, well, Mark, God will protect us. I prayed about that too. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to do the right thing today. And we're going to expose this case.
Wow.
And within a couple hours, we're sitting 4 hours with the FBI. A case that's been going on for 12 years that I'm involved with for 7 months. And after we shared with the FBI for 4 hours, mostly my wife sharing, they gave a choice that said, look, we're going to have to arrest your husband today, or he's going to have to start wearing a wire, going after the kingpins that's mentoring him and teaching him how to do this. But he's either going to have to work with us or he's going to be arrested. That's the choice he has. This is a massive crime. And I agreed to wear a wire. They met me at 6 the next morning. They shaved my chest, put microphones on my chest, had a tape recorder attached to my back with an athletic band. This is November 5th, 1992. Had a tape recorder in a briefcase. I was 34 years old, and I'm 67 now. So this is how long ago this is, 1992. And another tape recorder and a notebook, 3 different tape recorders. And I wore those tape recorders and had my chest shaved every morning, every Monday through Friday for 3 years.
Wow.
I wore a wire for 3 years. And the FBI, there's a documentary on my website. They didn't like the accuracy of the movie or the inaccuracy. So they did a documentary to combat the movie. And
really?
You watch it on Discovery Channel. It's on markwhitacre.com. It's called ID, right under the photo of my wife and I on markwhitacre.com. Investigation Discovery by Discovery Channel. And you watch that. That's the 3 real FBI agents. And that show, they talk about, and that's what I was told every day when I was wearing a wire. Mark, if these guys catch you, they're going to kill you. And you hear that for 3 years, took a tremendous toll. Tremendous toll. The most pressure I've ever been on my life, knowing that I'm wearing a wire against billionaires and that are going to go to prison, that hundreds of millions of dollars are going to be paid in fines. And it was the most high-pressure part of my life, wearing a wire for 3 years in my early 30s.
Wow. All right. So you're doing this, you're in meetings, people are saying stuff. I remember you saying you thought it was going to be a short-term thing. And then the next thing you know, it led to another and uncovering, another uncovering, and another uncovering.
Yeah, it became 11 products because everybody bragging about their illegal activity. It became 11 different products.
How did you manage stress during those 3 years?
I wasn't a believer. I had too much education tell me there was no God. So I would be blowing the driveway off. In that documentary, in that Discovery Channel documentary, they actually have actors reenact that. I was blowing the driveway off with a gas leaf blower at 3 a.m. with a jacket and tie on, and my microphones attached to my chest during thunderstorms.
Oh
I mean,
man.
I was losing it. I lost 60
Oh,
pounds. People at work thought I had cancer. A lot of people were showing up on tape that I was recording. Mark, you need to see a doctor. I think you have cancer. You are sick.
wow.
I was having a nervous breakdown during that time.
So the part of the story that just blew me away is that you get to the end of the being an informant, and they offer you a deal, and they offer you, if I remember correctly, 6-month deal. Is that correct? To go to
Yeah.
jail for 6 months.
Yeah. Couple
What
things that
happened?
lead to that. Couple things
Okay.
that lead to that, Chad. Basically, they came to me before they did an FBI raid. And before the FBI raid, Mark, they said where they're going to raid and get the computers and so on and the paperwork that supported what's on tape. And I know when I was at Purpose Summit, you only have a certain limited time to speak, so you're sharing a detailed story in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But the fact that we have just a little more time to
Yeah.
really break that down, they said, Mark, the company's they're going to learn pretty quick that you're working with us, that you're the mole, that you're the informant. This company, number 56 largest company on the Fortune 500, is going to come after you with everything they have, everything. So we're telling you right now, anything you've done that they're going to bring up, you tell us now, we'll give you full immunity. You have immunity because you risked your life for 3 years for us. Full immunity, but you got to tell us now. It can't be the company bring it up. You got to tell us, and that way we can say, yeah, we already knew that. We gave him immunity for that for wearing the wire for 3 years. And I had some under the table bonuses. When you're earning an extra close to $1 billion a year in price fixing, you benefit from that. So I had some under the table bonus, about 9 million. I thought, should I tell the FBI? Well, they're going to make me then pay that back. And how am I going to live when it gets exposed and I'm an informant? I'm going to get fired. I'm only 38 by that point after World Wire for 3 years. Who's going to hire somebody World Wire against their own company? Chad, it'd be easier to get a job as a felon than someone World Wire against their own company for 3 years. So I thought, and I was addicted to that lifestyle, that lavish lifestyle. I thought, well, how am I going to live? If I tell the FBI they give that back, we're bankrupt. So I didn't tell them. I thought, well, the company wouldn't bring it up. And I didn't tell them that. So I had full immunity going into this, full immunity. The day that ADM learned what was going on, they contacted FBI and said, well, Mark Whitacre's no white knight informant. Did he tell you about 9 million he didn't pay tax on? Did he tell you about 9 million that him being one of the top 5 leaders that you have to report your salary? He didn't report that part to the SEC. So the FBI come to my house and said, Mark, what about this that they're sharing? We told you had full immunity if you tell us everything. Why didn't you tell us this? And I said, that's my severance. I mean, how are we going to live as a family if I had to pay that back too? I'm already losing my job working with FBI. Now we'd lose everything if I shared that, because no one's going to hire someone to wear a wire for 3 years. It's going to take me years to get back on my feet. And they said, Mark, we can't give you immunity anymore. You had full immunity. We can't give it to you. And they went to the prosecutors and got me a 6-month plea agreement. 6 months, deal of a lifetime still. Because they said, the prosecutor said he did a lot more for us than what he did wrong. Right. And he risked his life. 6 months, a Martha Stewart sentence. My wife and I were sitting from my lawyers. Mark, they said, Mark, you got 48 hours to sign it. 6 months in federal prison. I looked at my wife and said, I just wore a wire for 3 years. I don't know if I could do 6 months. Ginger said, Mark, you go in at 38, you come out at 38. Let's put it behind us. And I looked at Ginger and said, Ginger, it's all your fault. I'm in this mess because of you. Ginger, I've had to wear a wire 3 years because of you. I'm going to do the opposite you want me to do. And I ripped up that 6-month plea agreement, threw it in a trash can, fired the lawyer on the spot. Again, not having God. These are impulse decisions. Fought the case, hired new lawyers, fought the case for 3 years in the courts. Now I'm 40 and got 8.5 years instead. And I had a 6-month deal. I had full immunity and lost it. Then I had a 6-month plea agreement and ripped it up. My own worst enemy every step of the way.
That part of the story blows me away. Just knowing that. All right. So you do this, you get this sentence, and you're in prison for 8 years.
Now from age 40 to 48. I would have went at 38 and got out at 38.
Wow. Well, I'm 49, so I would have been like about the same age when you came out.
Yeah.
And that's phenomenal. And so what happened in prison?
Well, leading up to that, I was so depressed with 8.5 year sentence. I wrote a 17-page letter to Ginger and my 3 kids, 3 young children at the time. They're 38 to 45 now, but they're older than I was even when all this was happening now. And I was so depressed, I tried to kill myself, Chad. I tried to take my own life before I went to prison. I was hospitalized for a month. heavily medicated for post-traumatic stress disorder, wearing the
Wow.
wire, heavily medicated for clinical depression. I was depressed. I didn't want to live. I said, I can't do 8 years in prison after 3 years in the wire. I
No.
can't do it. It was that simple for me. And I said, I'm not going to have a family when I get out. Who's going to hire me when I get out? Life's over. Tried to take my own life at age 40.
Wow.
And hospitalized for a month. The guy from CBMC showed up, read about me in the newspaper, showed up at my house right before prison, a few months before. And he said, Mark, his name was Ian Howes, part of a group called Christian Businessmen Connection, CBMC. He said, Mark, prison will be the beginning of your life, and you're going to find your true purpose in your life with a journey you're ready to start. And I said, how's that, Ian? I'm about ready to go to prison for 8 years. He said, Mark, I'm going to introduce you to God, and I'm going to introduce you to Jesus. I said, Ian, I grew up in a Christian home. I know the gospel. I went to church. My parents forced me to go to church, but I learned through 8 years of college, there is no God. He said, Mark, I think if you go through this Operation Timothy Bible study with me, it can start changing your life. Let's do it. So I spent several hours a week with him right before I went to prison, and it started giving me hope, but I still had that education block. And then my second week in prison, a man named Chuck Colson showed up. Chuck Colson was the White House counsel under President Nixon in the 70s, and he went to prison in the 70s, and he became a Christian. He's visited me in 1998. So 20 years earlier, he became a Christian through the prison system, through the brokenness. And he was White House counsel for President Nixon, went to prison for Watergate and became a Christian. It changed his life. He started a ministry called Prison Fellowship. And he's visited with me. And I started telling him, I said, Chuck, this is my second week in prison. In 1998, February 98, I said, Chuck, I already have someone taking me through a Bible study. I want to believe, but I got 8 years of education telling me they're not. He said, Mark, he went to Brown, another Ivy League. He was told there was no God. He said, Mark, you went to Cornell and tell you that there's no God. He said, do you think there's a PhD scientist that believes in God? And I said, no, I don't think there's any exists. And he started showing me article after article, book after book. He started discipling me, some of the best scientists in the world. Albert Einstein wrote an article, only God could create the universe and create man. Big Bang Theory was impossible. I said, they sure didn't tell me that at Cornell. Sir Isaac Newton wrote as much about Jesus in his memoir as he did about science. And I said, they sure didn't teach me that at Cornell. Francis Collins discovered human genome as a Christian. And it was dozens of such examples to the point where I got, how can you be a scientist and not believe in God after everything that I just got educated with over several months by Chuck Colson? So I became a Christian my first year in federal prison. It changed my life. $20 a month, 8 years, $3 million a year for 8 years, and $20 a month for 8 years after. I was a free man, Chad, in prison. When I gave my life to Jesus, the prison was that addiction to the greed that I had before prison. And I became a free man at federal prison at $20 a month.
Wow. Okay. So let's I love hearing that. I love hearing the first time. I love hearing the second time. So you find God in prison, and then you come out of prison, and then what happened?
20 years ago.
Oh, so here's the part. So people are going to ask, what happened to Ginger?
Yeah. Well, Ginger, she kept bringing the kids every weekend while I was in prison. And in June 4th, 1998, which was my third month in prison, I became a Christian after all the science. Even a scientist named Don Byerly in Minnesota, PhD biologist, who was an atheist, studied it and researched it because he wanted to prove God didn't exist. And Chuck Colson shared that book with me, that book. And that atheist became a Christian. He wrote a book, Surprised by Faith. Don Byerly, Dr. Don Byerly, that only God does exist and Jesus, Son of God. So that was kind of the last straw where I became a Christian, was that book. And so now I start helping guys get their GEDs, Spanish guys how to speak better English. For the first time in my life, I'm helping somebody else instead of myself. I never knew what servant leadership was because I never experienced it. Yeah. Now in prison, I'm experiencing it. I said, wow, this is great. And as I'm helping them with their GEDs, and then I started taking them through Bible study, introduce them to God, introduce them to Jesus. I said, what a great place you could work, teach them through education, and then also share the gospel. I said and I had 8 years experience to do that. So when I got out, I thought, this is what I want to do the rest of my life, mix work with evangelism. And I got out almost 20 years ago. I learned air conditioning, heating, and air conditioning in prison because I thought, who's going to hire a felon? Companies started visiting me in prison that were biotech companies, and they had me help them while I was in prison. A few of those offered me a job the day I got out. I joined a company in biotech. God bless me, back into biotech industry. It was with a Christian CEO. So it was a company with a ministry and prayer groups. And it was as much working for a ministry as it was at work. I thought I love this work, evangelism. And I tell you, I started, Chad, like someone right out of college, and I became the COO and president of that company for almost 10 years.
Wow.
And I'm still on their advisory board of that company still today. And now I work for Coca-Cola Consolidated for the last 6.5 years. Coca-Cola Consolidated is the bottling side. It's headquartered in Charlotte, not the Atlanta Coca-Cola company. Coca-Cola Consolidated has a purpose statement. Our only purpose to honor God in all we do by serving others, pursuing excellence and growing profitably. Think about that. Publicly traded, $7 billion in revenue, 17,800 just shy of 18,000 employees, publicly traded on the NASDAQ, and a purpose statement to honor God in all we do by serving others, pursuing excellence and growing profitably. And I'm vice president of culture and care. So I'm responsible for the faith integration of the company. I report to the chairman's department, executing their vision to basically have a ministry within the organization. I mean, it's no more biochemistry. It's no more pricing, no more. It's doing God's work. Just what I love doing while I was in prison. This whole faith at work movement, this evangelism inside the workplace, just like it was evangelism within the prison system. And I got to experience that for 8 years. And we have a chaplain in every plant, 104 plant sites. Think of this, 104 bottling plant, largest Coca-Cola bottler in America, 104 sites. 104 plant, a chaplain in every plant, basically a chaplain for every 200 employees. That's our department, the chaplaincy report to. We use Corporate Chaplains of America that trains them and equips them and hires them. Then we hire them from them and then get them in our plant sites. 23 years now we've had chaplaincy. Over 100 prayer groups. I lead 16 prayer groups myself. Bible studies. We have a mentorship program called Radical Mentoring. 2 very mature believers and 8 young believers. And it's a year-long program, and you help them grow in their faith to get their quiet time built and to be a better spouse, a better parent, a better leader, a better in the community, to really, once they give their life to Jesus, to help them grow in their faith. And I tell you something, Chad, the numbers, we're really careful about being a publicly traded company, but I can tell you in 2023, it was over 100 per month recommits, not just salvations, because we look as a recommit is like a salvation, someone that may know of God, but they have God from their head to their heart. So recommits and salvations over 100 a month in 2023, and we've been double that in 2024 so far. That's more recommits and salvations than most churches. I mean, it's amazing. And for me I can't wait to get up in the morning and see what God has in store.
You know, I think I saw a statistic that the average church leads 1 or 2 people a year. That's and look what's happening. So the people talk about business marketplace. You're actually doing it. So I guess I need to know. People are going, how is he doing that? Like, what steps are you taking? Practically are you taking? And second of all, how are you getting away with it, knowing what's going on in our society today?
Well, for one, the chaplain is a big part of it. The prayer groups, the Bible studies, the discipleship program called Radical Mentoring, 2 mature believers mentoring 8 younger in their faith mentees. And then we have a chapel service called The Gathering. It's called The Gathering, Faith, Fellowship, and Food monthly. They come for a free meal, but they're also going to hear a message. Wow. And I tell you, the number that show up is amazing. We have a weekly devotional, and it's audio. So our department, we have someone named Julie Altmans that prepares these devotionals, but we have a different voice. So it could be a forklift driver. One week, it's every Monday morning, and it's audio. So even our truck drivers can hear it, or the ones on forklift, the ones that are our deskless employees, so they don't have to read something. It's audio, and it's every week, but it's a different voice. It may be executive vice president one week sharing it, and someone in a plant sharing it the next. So all different levels, all different departments, to get everyone's voice, some of the mature Christians' voice, sharing that devotional, even though they're prepared by our department. We like to have a voice, and we have what's called T Factor. And you mentioned that I'm also executive director of T Factor, in addition the vice president of culture and care. And T Factor is where we share with the world, and we have events, virtual. We got one coming up September 5th in Dallas, an in-person event. And that's what we did at Purpose Summit. When I met you two, we did that afternoon at T Factor event.
That's right.
We share with the world how we integrate faith, and our lawyers share. This is all legal as long as you don't force someone to see a chaplain, force someone to be in a discipleship program, force someone to listen to the devotional. As long as you keep it optional, they can use a chaplain, listen to devotional, join a prayer group if they want to, but they don't have to. And that's how you keep it legal.
That's great. And so for those that are watching, that's what he's talking about when he says T factor, because these are ways for you, if you're interested in doing something like this within your business, your organization, then there are ways you can do it because people are afraid legally. And those are some key tips that he just gave. Is the biggest tip is make it optional, but give them options. And so a lot of people won't do anything. So what we're suggesting is do something, but just tell them they don't have to do it, but give them an option to do it. And it sounds like people are responding to it. The amount of salvations he was telling me even before the show was super exciting, and it really it inspires me and also makes me feel bad at the same time, because I'm like, why am I not doing that? My form is different, but at the same time, to see it successfully done in business is truly inspiring. So for those
Chad, I'd say there's no better place for ministry than the workplace. People have to go to work. So you're going to hire people that don't go to church yet. They may not even be hearing about God. What a great place for them to come in and learn about God.
Yep. And then you have a book called Against All Odds, which I just put up on the screen. People can grab that on Amazon. What other ways can they follow you, get more information about not only your book, but then also how you're implementing these strategies in business?
Yeah, it's a couple of different ways. If they want to email me directly, I have markwhitacre.com. I mentioned that Discovery Channel documentary is on there that the real FBI agents did along with my wife and I. They kind of wanted to fill in the holes that they felt the movie kind of left out of the case. Because the movie, it was an atheist director, so it's not a Christian film. It's a crime drama. It ends with me in prison. And life really was just beginning when I went to prison. So it's kind of missed the last 28 years of my life. It did, the movie. It misses the redemption story and the second chance story. But markwhitacre.com, it does have a contact link that has my email address on that link. And then we also have T Factor, T-Factor, T standing for transformation, T-Factor.com. And on that has about what I talked about, how we integrate faith, how we became a purpose-driven company, a faith-friendly company, as at T-Factor.com. And they can join a virtual event or a person event or an on-demand T-Factor that we're just launching here in the next couple of weeks, where they can watch it on their own, even in different languages we have it in.
So I just put it up on the screen, the T-Factor.com. So did they seek your input on the movie? Did you talk to Matt Damon? So how did that happen?
Yeah, we did talk to Matt Damon. Basically, there were 3 books on my case. Against All Odds is the one that my wife and we hired a ghostwriter. We got to share our faith journey, because the other 2 books came out in my first couple months in prison. So I wasn't a Christian when the other 2 books came out. A lawyer wrote one called Rats in the Grain, and then someone from New York Times wrote one called The Informant. And that's who the movie bought to do, even before our book was out. That's who the movie, Warner Brothers bought that book to do the movie. So it ended with me in prison, that book did. It came out my first couple months in prison, so it does not have the faith journey, the redemption story. But we did get to walk the red carpet. We got to meet Matt Damon. That's on my website. Got pictures of us with them. We got to share the gospel with them. We shared our book Against All Odds with them. My wife got to talk to his wife. His wife was so encouraged by her testimony and how her marriage survived. We're 45 years married. And I tell you, I never forget when my wife came out in June 98, and I kept blaming her when she's visiting me in prison and even before prison. And she came and I said in tears, this is after I gave my life to Christ, after Chuck Colson discipled me. And I said, Ginger, I've got no one to blame but myself. No one forced me to stay at that company and be involved with all the price fixing and all those shenanigans. I should have left. And our marriage started literally early in my prison, started reconciling. And we're married 45 years. Not only did our marriage survive, it thrived. And our 3 children are doing great, walking with the Lord. I mean, God has so blessed our life, to the point my wife says today, murder was on the table. Murder was an option, and divorce wasn't. And when I took a 6-month plea agreement and threw it away, murder was on the table. She says today, thank God I didn't sign the 6-month plea agreement, that I would have not even listened to a Chuck Colson with a 6-month sentence, that I had to be broken at the end of myself. And so we thank God today I didn't sign that 6-month plea agreement.
What was it like for you when you finally got out of prison and you embraced Ginger for the first time?
Well, they let us embrace them. I was in a white-collar camp. Even the last 5 years, I was even on a Navy base. So, I mean, we got to embrace some, in a visiting room setting in prison. I see her every Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. She moved to live right next to the prison to visit me every weekend. And so, I mean, and there's not many wives that stay through marriages like that.
No.
But I tell you, to get out 20 years ago, my family stayed with me is a miracle. is a
Amazing.
miracle of God.
Amazing. Well, praise God. Thank you so much for your testimony. Thank you for sharing this today. I wanted to interview so bad, and I was just as captivated this time around as I was last time. And thank you for the work you're doing in business and being a pioneer there and actually doing something tangible. It's inspired me, and I know it's going to inspire others. I know there's many, at least business people that I'm going to be sharing this with so that they can be inspired to make a difference too. Keep up the great work, and thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Chad. Thank you for having me. Living a life of significance is so much more energizing than living a life of success, the way the world defines success.
That's right. That's right. I actually say that obedience is or success is determined by obedience, and that's a big deal. And it's not even determined by outcomes. And that's hard to say from a business person.
Yes, it is. Well,
Amen.
thank you for having me, Chad.